Karen was screaming into her phone, fake tears streaming down her face, telling the 911 operator that an aggressive man was threatening her and her son. I stood there on my own porch, coffee mug in hand, staring at her in disbelief. Minutes later, a squad car rolled into my driveway, the officer's hand resting on his gun as he fixed me with a cold stare. But then, his eyes landed on the small pin on my jacket, and suddenly his whole demeanor shifted. He snapped to attention and saluted. "Yes, Major General. How can we assist you today?" Sir Karen's face drained of color right then, and she knew her little play had just imploded. But to understand how we got to that moment, I have to take you back 6 months earlier. I had just retired from 30 years in military intelligence. My grandfather had passed, leaving me his cabin on Pine Lake, a modest log house with a weathered dock where he taught me how to fish and how to wait. That cabin was supposed to be my sanctuary, a quiet place after a life of noise and secrets. What I didn't expect was that moving in would drop me straight into the twisted politics of the Pine Lake Homeowners Association. At first, my neighbors were polite, curious, and respectful. Then came Karen Mitchell, Queen Bee of the HOA. She showed up at my door with muffins and a smile that never touched her eyes, introduced herself as president, and immediately started asking intrusive questions. Did I live alone? Did I plan to stay year-round? Would family be visiting? She looked past me into the cabin like she already owned it. Within weeks, the notices started arriving. My dock needed repairs. My mailbox wasn't up to code. The color of my cabin didn't meet community standards. The fines were steep hundreds of dollars, and every one of them conveniently targeted me alone. My grandfather had lived here 50 years without a single violation. Now, suddenly, I was public enemy number 1. I knew exactly what was happening. Karen wanted me gone. She wasn't subtle about it either. She'd march up my driveway with her 20-something son Brandon, a kid who looked like he'd never done a day's work in his life, and smile sweetly while telling me perhaps it would be better for everyone if you just moved along. One morning, she even declared to my face that my cabin would be her son's perfect birthday gift. I laughed in disbelief. But she wasn't laughing. She was serious. And when I told her flat out that my grandfather built this place with his own hands and it would never be for sale, her eyes turned hard and mean. Then the harassment campaign began. Power outages for maintenance, but only at my address. The water company getting anonymous reports of contamination in my well. Landscaping crews showing up at 6 a.m., revving leaf blowers beneath my bedroom window. Fines doubling. My mailbox jammed with HOA letters every week. Brandon started showing up drunk, swaggering on my dock, telling me his mother had connections, judges, lawyers, politicians. He slurred. "She's going to make your life hell in ways you can't imagine, old man." And I'll be honest, there were nights I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if I should just pack it in. Sell the cabin, leave Pine Lake, disappear. I'd fought enough battles in my life. Did I really need another one this time against a petty suburban tyrant with a homeowner's badge? Part of me whispered that I was too old, too tired, that maybe she was right that I didn't belong. But every time that thought came, I'd look around at the wood beams my grandfather cut at the dock where he taught me patience. And something inside me said, hell no. This is mine. The turning point came one morning when I spotted fresh footprints in the mud outside my basement window. Later that day, I found a crumpled scrap of paper jammed into my screen door. 3 shaky words scrawled in weak handwriting. Help me, H. That sent a chill down my spine. Whoever left it was terrified. Whoever H was, they needed me. I went back to my training. I planted recording devices in the community center where the HOA held its meetings. What I heard was worse than I imagined. Karen and her little inner circle weren't talking about landscaping or property values. They were talking about me. "The Harrison situation needs to be resolved quickly," Karen whispered. "If the fines don't work, we'll have to get more creative." And then silence followed by a laugh that made my blood run cold. I started tailing her. Twice a week, Tuesday and Friday afternoons, she left the neighborhood in a hurry, returning 4 hours later with a small black bag. One day, I followed her to Mercy General Hospital. Inside, I struck up a conversation with a volunteer at the desk. "Oh, you must mean Mrs. Mitchell," she said. "She visits her husband Harry every week. Such a devoted wife." I found Harry's room. What I saw nearly stopped my heart. He was frail, mid-60s, half-paralyzed eyes wide and desperate. He tried to speak, but only garbled sounds came out. And then I watched Karen smiling that cold smile as she held his chin and forced him to drink from a small cup. "Your vitamin supplement, darling," she cooed. His eyes begged for help. Later, a nurse confided, strangest thing, his symptoms always get worse right after her visits. Toxicology shows signs of poisoning, but no one can identify the source. The shaky handwriting on my note made perfect sense. Harry had written it. Karen wasn't just a bully in a homeowners meeting, she was poisoning her own husband. And she wanted my cabin for one chilling reason. Its basement was soundproof, isolated, perfect for hiding a dying man until he conveniently passed away. When she came to my door that night, her mask slipped. She admitted it. She bragged about her plan. She told me Harry was worth billions and she needed somewhere private to finish the job. She even confessed that her other husband's deaths weren't accidents either. And then she looked me dead in the eye. "You have 24 hours to cooperate. Either you help me, or you become another problem I solve." I kept my face calm, but inside, every instinct screamed. What she didn't know was that I had already set a recorder in my living room. Every word of her confession was captured. I reached out to Officer Rodriguez, the same cop who had recognized my insignia, and when he heard the tape, he brought in the FBI. The plan was simple. I'd pretend to surrender. Let Karen think she won. Then they'd catch her in the act. The next evening, she arrived in a white medical van, Brandon trailing behind in the SUV. Harry was strapped to a gurney, eyes wide with terror as they rolled him into my basement. Karen was all business, dressed in scrubs, prepping a syringe. "This will help ease his transition," she said with a smile. My stomach turned as she tapped the needle. And then movement in the shadows. Agents stepped out, weapons drawn, badges flashing. "Karen Mitchell, you're under arrest for attempted murder conspiracy and multiple counts of fraud." Her face went from smug to pale in seconds. She tried to argue, screaming that she was providing care, but the syringe full of poison in her hand told the real story. Then, Harry, with every ounce of strength he had left, reached out and traced letters on an agent's palm. Karen. Poison. Help. That was it. The last nail in her coffin. Brandon collapsed, sobbing that he thought they were helping Uncle Harry. But Karen... She just glared at me as they cuffed her. Pure hatred in her eyes. "You have no idea what you've cost me," she hissed. "Harry was going to set me up for life. Now you've ruined everything." And just like that, the self-appointed queen of the HOA was finished. Sometimes the loudest bully in the neighborhood turns out to be the most dangerous predator. But predators always slip, and when they do, patience and persistence will bring them down.